So we're making some progress over here. I've done some stuff on the brake. This is a piece that's going to go into the floor of the car. And this is what we're going to run the tubing through. As you can see over here, this top one is a stainless steel, so it's kind of nice that it's gonna stop the heat a little bit. And for the radiator, these things, they just fit right over. Probably gonna put them on the side and make some kind of fitment, make some kind of structure to bolt that in. Like, I like this kind of fitment. It's like clamped, and the reason for that is that radiators can expand a little bit, and this material allows that to happen. So that's basically the brake operating for this car. This is a little bit thicker material because it's like the floor of the car, so this is going to run underneath the car. It's going to go in, of course, like this, in that whole spot that we cut out last time. Yeah, so that's like a nice starting point for the whole structure for the coolant tubes. So that's what it would look like inside the car. It's very, very little room, as you can see there. I've spaced it out a little bit between that box which contains all the fuel stuff, and I need to be a little bit higher here so we can pull the lid off. There it's like wedged between that structure for the rear axle, and back there you can see that it's gonna come through the floor right over there. Marked it out a little bit, spaced it out so the lid is not going to get caught in between there, and then we should be coming up right in between there and there. You can see the exhaust already, so that's like kind of like a close fit, but that's the only way you can really do this right now. And we're going to box off the car around that line that you see over there, so it'll be around here, I guess. You can see that line right there that we're going to be using. That's like basically where the real structure ends of the car, and the rest is just like sealed up a little bit. So we're going to be using that line, so it means that we'll probably be cutting this somewhere along here. And the radiator is going to come in on the other side because we need to mount it like what would seem upside down. So the radiator is going to go in there somewhere, and we're going to make the ducting right here through the wind screen, or the rear glass, or how you want to call it. So that's the templates that we cut out to close off the rear of the E46. Always a good idea to spend a lot of time on that, because the better your pieces are, the less welding and bonding that you need to do to get them in. So a plate in the back, which is of course left a little bit too tall, so we can cut it off real easily, but that's basically going to be the new firewall position. Looking at making the tubes over here, it's kind of nice if they have a nice rectangular angle with the firewall. So bend those tubes over there, that's where they're going to come in. Keep a little lip over there to shield them from the exhaust, but in the future we may change that exhaust over there. And here you can see that they're sticking in, so we're going to be cutting somewhere over here. This is basically going to be where the firewall is going to sit. So this is like the edge, so right there where this piece is stopping, that's where we're also going to be cutting our firewall and moving it to that side. So there's a nice little edge for the air intake. Over there on the floor, we're going to make a little little ledge that's going to stand up, going to indicate the angle of the air intake, like that, and make the air intake into the rear window. Of course, we're going to close this off, and there's going to be a stainless lid over there. It's going to cover all that. You can see the little corridor that we welded, boxed all the way up, so the lines can pass through. Of course, we're going to brace it under here from here to there, put a brace there. And because it's all the way boxed up and also on the inside, we put some structure back. It doesn't lose any strength, but it's going to give us a straight shot out there to the rear mount radiator. And there you can see the piece that we are welding in. There's where the floor is a little bit of a weird shape, so we're going to make a separate piece for that. It's also going to go up a little bit, so it's going to sit a little bit higher. So yeah, that's going to be the corridor for the lines to come through. Still got a little bit of length back here, so I can move it a little bit forward if I want to. It's just now for checking out the fitment. Yeah, so it looks really simple, but it's kind of a lot of work to get it right. It's going to be nice and raised, so there's no chance of ripping the pipes open. And from there we're going to go here. And then obviously this is going to be cut. We're going to go into the floor right over there. So yeah, there you go. And that's the metal piece in its final shape. There we go. It's a nice angle in it over there. And we have the raised floor section here. And there you can see the rest of the trajectory of the tubing. Welded M6 nuts in there, which are going to hold the tubes up. We've, as you can see, we've welded it shut over here. It's still dark, and we're basically welding it along the whole perimeter. Some spots are easier from the inside, some spots are easier from the outside. And yeah, that's gonna create a nice room for those coolant tubes. And that's where you can see where they're coming into the floor, right over there. Still a little too tall, so we're gonna be going from there to there with the electric water pump and stuff. Over here, like, there's no space between anywhere over there to go anywhere with the rear tubes. There's just no room, like especially over there. There's no way you can fit anything in between there. It's already super crowded, so we had to move outside of the frame rails, and we couldn't go to the passenger side because of the way the engine bay is set up. So here we are, and it's starting to look the way it should. We have both plates in there. It's always a little bit of work to remove a lot of the sound deadening over there. Of course, nice fitment is important with this kind of stuff. Yeah, so quite happy how this stuff is coming along, and we're probably going to be folding this that way over there, and this section is probably going to stick forward or backwards. So basically going to make that opening as big as possible. So we're going to be folding these pieces right over there as they come off the chassis rails. And that's basically what it's going to be looking like. Of course, we're going to make that hole a little bit bigger over there. Like I said, we're going to fold the sides with the radiator in place. I think we're probably going to be folding that section forward at 90 degrees. So it has a nice little guidance for the piece that's going to collect the air from the rear window. Of course, these are going to be trimmed to size, but it's always, with all these kinds of deals, it's always a good deal to keep them a little bit bigger, because you never know why. Radiator is going to sit over here. There's not a huge amount of space left over, but yeah, we need to come through with the coolant lines in between over here and move them to over there. So it needs to basically get a 90-degree angle into there. So it all seems really simple, but it's a lot of measuring, a lot of trying. As I always say, it's a really good idea to square things up. So like I said, make everything square, just like that. So it's way easier to work. Shape of the car is always difficult. So over there you can see that's a lot of work to get that right. Especially because this car is not cut off. If the rear is cut off, like I have the video about making these plates for a car that's already cut off, which is of course way easier because you can hold the plate from the back and just trace it out like we did with the E46 I had some templates from the black car, but there are small differences in these cars, a little production tolerance, little higher tolerance in production of these cars than I like to have. So yeah, it's always a little bit of handiwork before all that stuff fits correctly. And yeah, of course, it's very important to do it right in once. So that's basically the main layout, and it's going to take the air from the rear window, which, as everybody knows, I'm not a huge fan of that, but you're also working in certain budget constraints. You can't always do it the way you would do it yourself. So it's going to be nice. We're going to give it our own little touch, so it's not going to look like really weird pickup truck like, which I really don't like. Yeah, so I'm kind of glad with the progress so far. It's a little further. Got these pieces in the back here. As you can see, put the edges of them in the brake. That's where you can see where the pipes are going to be ending up. Nice trajectory over there, and they're meeting the sidewall there at 90 degrees. Cool. And this is how I marked out the rear window. Super. So how you basically do this, because there's a lot of like nothing is straight on these things. So the way you start is by measuring out, in this case 40 centimeters that you take from the edge, and you do that everywhere. So you put the thing on 40 and you mark it all around. That way you get a line that's 40 centimeters under the top exactly. So you got a nice straight one. Then you measure from there to there. You take the center. Everything with race cars, super important to establish the center of everything you're doing first, because nothing is straight on cars. So you never measure from the sides, you always measure from the center. Everything is measured from the center. It doesn't matter if it's a roll cage or intercooler or whatever, but sometimes it's kind of hard to establish what the center is. So we got that established over here. The same we've done here. So we're measuring from there. In this case was 8 centimeters. And you measure it everywhere. You put your lines, and then you put like masking tape, just like that. Again, you measure from left to right, this corner to that corner, center line, and that's from the center line, that's where you start working. We're going to have about 77 centimeters of scoop. That's going to be in between over there. So I kept this a little smaller, keeping this on 70. So you'll have about 3.5 centimeters on each side. It's a little nicer if the window is the window cutout is a little smaller than the air intake. As you know, I don't really love this style, but like we're also on time constraints, and the cage is already made in this car, so there's no real way to get the air from anywhere else, and it's also not a full cut off rear. So the only way to do this is from the back, and as everybody knows, I really like to keep the silhouette of the car in shape, so we're not going to cut a huge hole. We're just going to cut out these triangles and round them off on the top, of course. Show you guys how we're going to do that later, but first we're going to make that air intake right over there. And we have the floor, I don't know if I showed that already, and I'll cut it out. We have the floor over there welded in. Yeah, so coming along nice. So time to start working on the air duct. Of course, you keep these things a little too big to start with, so we put this piece in the brake. Another floor piece over here. As you can see, that there's a very slight edge over there, so we're going to fill up basically. Radiator is going to sit over there, and these two pieces are going to be connecting. As you can see, we have a little flange over here. It's fitting really nicely with those pieces. And that's basically where the opening is going to be sitting. So I'm going to tilt it backwards and make sure that we have the right shape over here. I made a paper template here. After you fit the test piece, in this case we made it so it goes on both ways. If you fold it, check if it fits, trace it out on the aluminum piece, and let's see if we've done it all right. What we're basically going to do is get this piece right here, replicate it. As you can see, that's the other piece we put in the brake. That's where it's going to be leaning on, sitting on. Same as those flanges. That's the 40 centimeter that we're aiming for. You also got to get that reservoir in there somewhere. It's basically what it's going to be. The first cut of the aluminum piece. As you can see, we left a little too much material, did it on purpose over here, so we can measure out how much difference this is and cut this a little further, same as on that side. And this, so basically what I always do is like a little block like this, you keep that a little bit too tall in both directions, so you can measure exactly how much difference you have over here and exactly how much difference you have over there. This distance you remove it from here, and that distance you remove it from there, and then you'll have a perfect fit. It's looking pretty good. Of course, it's a little bit too tall, like I said, but that's okay. That lower piece over there is gonna connect, and here you can see that we have really nice clearance over there, and it's big enough to connect to the rear window. So our template worked out. Do a little bit more measuring, make sure that everything sits 100% straight. And yeah, so we have this excess area over here. We're gonna maybe fold that out or something, because the radiator is way bigger, of course. It would be nice if that completely attaches to the radiator, of course. So yeah, that's how it's gonna be. So there you can see the cutout. So there you have a really good fitment over there. This whole top is going to be blocked off over here. So it basically counts as how it fits until here, because this is going to be plated up anyways. It's a good time to trace out the rough shape of the window. Keep it a little taller, so it's definitely going to fit. Trace it nice and like wide, so as you can see over here, of course the window is going to arc a little bit like that, but the general shape is going to be good, and it's going to be a rubber sitting on top over here. There's a lot we can also like put an edge on it, but the thing with all that stuff is this is a client build, it's not my own car. There's a limit to the time and the budget that we have, so you can go crazy with all kinds of bead rolling and all kinds of things, but it's just going to make stuff expensive. So it's just important that it's very rigid, and it's going to be a really good piece. And it's also nice that it can be taken out. So if you would crash the car horribly, you could take this out and put this in the next car. So a little further down the line, put this piece in here. It's just held in here with these quick release screws. As you can see, this was like kind of like the critical thing making this fit. Well, you guys probably can't see shit from this. That's that lower piece that we have over there, and here I'm keeping those flaps way too big until we determine where we're going to be having the radiator. So this is kind of nice. It's way higher than where the window is going to sit. Obviously we're going to be trimming that a little bit, but yeah, that's kind of how it's going to look. And like I said, the key with these things is to keep them like too big, because you can always remove something. I'll grab a light real quick and show you guys what's up over here. So that's where you can see where we welded that piece in, right over there and here. So there's not a huge amount of room, because there's also these two little cables that are passing under there all the way down there. And I want them to be removable, so this whole piece is easy to remove, kind of really easy. Like you need to remove the windscreen, of course, and that's where those cables are passing under. It's for the rear lights. Yeah, so it's kind of nice. Like welded it over there, tech welded. It's really difficult to weld for the reason that there's a lot of like double sheet over there. So this is all like one sheet, but behind that, that's like a sheet that's stacked on each other. I painted a little bit of primer on those panels just before I put them in, because you want to do as little spraying in the car as possible. Yeah, so it's ridiculously incredible. Like this is of course really flimsy because it's way too much of a piece, but considering that this is held in by only 3 or only 4 little M6 bolts, it's still pretty sturdy, and we're gonna add a little structure to that later. Yeah, so that's basically what it's looking like with the air intake. And there's the piece in the final shape. As you can see, so we still need to make a couple holes. This is where we're boxing it up. Made these plates over here and a nice flexible rubber that's gonna sit on the window. Cut that to size, so I always have like these rubber strips that are way too tall, and then you kind of like cut it to shape. And here, if that piece, and as you can see, it's all nice and boxed off. Obviously there's a little gap because it's not bolted on, but that's basically how that piece is going to be sitting here. It's going to flare out to the radiator. I'm going to cut this little portion off still. It's going to flare out to the radiator, and over there we're going to be mounting our reservoir somewhere in this area, something like that. And yeah, kind of cool. And it has the bolts down low there. It's going to be really a solid structure. So we're welding the nuts to the lower piece, as you can see, and this is the piece that we're using for the lines. And I marked it out over here. It needs to be cut a little bit, and then that way that piece will feed the hard lines right into the area where the radiator is sitting. And as you can see over here, it's kind of like a little trick. If you use like these style bolts, they will automatically center because of the shape of the head, and it will always center the nut in the hole. If you don't do that, it can be a little bit difficult to get the bolts in later. Yeah, I put a little bit of paint on there. It was difficult to find the correct paint for this, but I think we've done pretty well. It's kind of okay. Really happy how this turned out. We sealed everything off. It's a nice trick for painting cars. This is normal aluminum foil. It's really easy to fold it around little things that you don't want to screw up with in the process. It takes way less. So Mika, like that huge fishbowl, he actually put like paper on there, and I'm really happy how all that stuff turned out. Super nicely sealed off everything. And here, this is like kind of like difficult, but we eventually like forked this piece in here. So this is a nice little corridor. Yeah, so kind of happy with this. It's always a lot of work. We need to make a little drain there for when there's any water coming into the intake. Yeah, but so far so good. Of course, normally you want to paint the whole car after something like this, but you know, like I said, there's budget constraints, time constraints, things like that. So we also made the brackets here for the radiator. It's a little bit weird over there. So that's welded in there, and that's over there. It's about 5 or 4 millimeter. Yeah, so there you see the mounts that we made for the radiator. Sits over there, and it's a little corridor that we kept where the wires also for the fans and stuff. So we're going to put like silicone or a piece of rubber there that they can rub, but you need to get like back to the cabin with like the sensor for the controller for the fans, and like the feed for the fans, of course, the plus feed. So yeah, and here you can see the floor piece that we welded in. That's the other piece going through the floor right over there. And here this thing, yeah, so it's nice. It's kind of difficult area there with the pedal box, but got that all done under control. Here's our little reservoir, and here you can see the rubber where the lines are being fed through, and there's going to be or like the cables are being fed through. Yeah, little rubber piece over here, so that's where the firewall bolts to these two pieces. And there's the firewall installed. You can see the tubes coming out over there. And yeah, I'm kind of happy with it. It's cool. Over there we're sealing really nicely. Put a little rubber over there. And yeah, you can see the tubes coming in there, we're going to put a lid over there. There you can see they go into the floor cavity over there, and there we put an M6 long nut. Here it's nice and closed off, so kind of happy with that. That's correct, nice big area to cut the air from. The green color is actually kind of nice. It's not 100, well, it's a little bit better in real life than on the video, I guess. It's acceptable. Put that little flap over there to close off for the radiator. As you guys have seen, the radiator is not really symmetrical because HDK is like an F22 radiator for that HDK has. So here it has an extra cavity for like an oil cooler or something, but that's been blocked off with this plate, so we're not using that. So as you can see, the radiator is not 100% centered over there, so that's how we also didn't 100% center it here, but moved it in a way that the cool area of it is actually in the center of the car, which means that we have to offset the radiator a little bit. But of course it's super important that the fins of the radiator have the most exposure. So kind of a simple solution. Like I said, not a lot of bead rolling and stuff going on. It's important to me that all this stuff here is like closed off really nicely. You can see the cables coming in there. It works really nice. Nice rigid mount for the radiator, and of course it's important to run like nice fasteners and stuff. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think. It's like a simple way to do this stuff. Anybody with a brake can make this piece, and yeah. And you can see how down low now we have a really nice tight fit over there with the intake, so kind of happy with that. Nice, super nice over here. It's like now you can really tell that it's that's where all your extra time, the time you spent to make all this stuff fit, that's how it makes all the difference right now. Kind of cool. And let's put the radiator in place. As you can see, we cannot move it any further forward. It's already completely locked in. And this is where you can see where that radiator isn't 100% centered, so it's kind of off center. We can't move it any further to that direction as much as we may want to. So there's a really small part of that radiator that's kind of like, so there you can see a little bit how we guide the air to there. And yeah, so now we're kind of like checking out how to route the hoses and all that stuff. That's where the hoses come out. And of course the fans over there. We had to modify a couple things with the thermostat on this car. Like we had to shorten these studs which hold the crankshaft sensor in place, because that's usually sitting in your gearbox, but they put a different transmission on this car with some kind of adapter, which all you guys know I don't really like, but that's how you end up with like sensors. Like they made like a little bracket where that thing goes on, which was interfering, so these bolts couldn't come out. One thing that's kind of important with these thermostats, that this thing needs to sit in the upright position because it's made to help bleed the system. So that sits over there, and we modified this was not a really nice piece, as you guys may remember. On the other hand, it also wasn't in the budget to make a completely new one, so we welded a dash 20 on there. It was not our weld, like we only welded like that last part. Very difficult to weld because it was all like old and dirty material, but it's with all these jobs, like there are certain budgets and time constraints and stuff. It wasn't the nicest job that somebody else did, but it will work. Like I've heated it up a little bit and checked if it was holding liquid, and it's definitely not leaking. So it's not super nice, but yeah, hopefully the wrinkle paint makes it look a little bit nicer. And now it's actually serviceable after we took some material off those studs. Making some tubes here to the radiators, or tapping in for the sensor. So we're using regulator for the fans, and I'm tapping an NPT thread in this tube. This is the outflow tube that returns the cold coolant back to the motor. And the top one is the hot side, so that's basically the hot coolant from the motor coming to the radiator. And the bottom one, where we're putting the sensor in, is the return, so that's cold coolant back to the engine. As you can see, they have different wall thickness. This one is going to have hot coolant in it, and this one is not going to run on the floor of the car, so this is going to run in the back, so there's no harm there. And it's an open area where we pick up the air, so it's nice that this is like a thinner wall thickness, so it can shed a little bit of heat. This is going to insulate the coolant way better. So the cold coolant tubes I run a little thicker, and the hot coolant tubes I run them a little thinner, except when they're under the car, where they're both this wall thickness, because something could happen, of course, with the car. You could run over a curbstone or a rock or whatever, so I want them to be a little bit beefy, but in the area where the radiator sits, you don't really need that beefiness.
Don't forget to take a look at our website as well, einzel.nl. We ship worldwide, of course, Wisefab, Feal suspension, our own brand Einzel, gearboxes, quick change differentials, axles, all kinds of things. A lot of fabrication components, of course, air jacks, subframes for quick change, you name it. Drop us an email and we'll hook you up.